Welcome to the Gaggle, where we bring you inside the newsroom to talk politics beyond what's in print. This week, the politics of weed have overtaken Phoenix City Hall. A second migrant caravan could be headed towards the United States. But first, Ron, you took a look at some of these Facebook ads that were posted by Russians during the 2016 election. Some of them have ties to Arizona. They were intended to sow discontent during the election cycle. What did you learn?
You know, so these are the ads that came from Russian troll farms, according to intelligence estimates by U.S. intelligence agencies, and released last week by congressional Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee. We got to see these ads close with the details of where they decided to run them and such, and wow, it was just really pedestrian and sort of confusing in some cases as to what they were intended to accomplish and how effective might these things be. What we do know is that they were fairly widely circulated and discussed and shared in various forums, but in terms of the substance and the way that those might have impacted voters potentially was more of a puzzle than anything that was sort of a straight line that said vote for Donald Trump or don't vote for Hillary or something else.
They seem to definitely be seizing on topics that are clearly divisive, topics that could potentially prompt a lot of conversations about sexual orientation, race. I mean, is there a strategy there? And there were thousands of ads that were dumped, right?
Yeah, there were 3,500 ads that were dumped overall, and I guess this strategy would be best summarized as divide and conquer, if that was the goal here. That, for example, they dialed in on a murder-suicide at a Glendale high school in 2016, and they used that to sort of bring together people who are sympathetic to the causes of the lesbian gay community. And what they did then is a month later, having engendered some support in that community, they then started sending out messages for people who are Bernie Sanders supporters. And so it was just intended to foment discord and create controversy where it really didn't normally exist. And so that one is fairly subtle and kind of puzzling. Others were, more direct, and they were intended for Second Amendment enthusiasts in Arizona and some other states. Saying, keep the invaders out and protect borders and such. And it was a very divisive kind of message, reinforcing, I think, the preconceived biases of certain kinds of groups with certain characteristics. Again, how effective it was is kind of a puzzle.
It does seem, though, as though they're touching on topics that clearly were popular with Trump's campaign back in 2016, and those issues clearly worked for him.
Right.
Dan, speaking of controversies, you spent many days with the migrant caravan that recently reached the U.S.-California border. This is a caravan that Donald Trump has talked a lot about and has used as his in speaking as to why a border wall is needed and talking about the need to crack down on illegal immigration. What did you learn with your time with them?
Well, I was with him in 3 different cities, in the city of Puebla, Mexico City, and then finally in Tijuana. And this is a group of people that has been portrayed by the Trump administration as a threat to national sovereignty and to border security. And I have to say, the very first day that we arrived in Puebla, it was around 10 o'clock at night, and we went into the shelter, the photographer and I, Nick Oza. And when you see the people up close in reality, it's hard to portray them or to believe that they're a threat to national security. These were extremely desperate people. They were sleeping on the floor. They didn't know where their next meals were going to come from. And there were people who basically got up, left their homes with a complete uncertain future, how they were going to even arrive at the United States border, a distance of 2,500 miles, with very little money in their pocket. To me, really showed how desperate they were. And once they got to the United States, there's a complete uncertainty of what would happen to them, whether they would even be allowed into the United States, and if they were, whether they ultimately would be successful in achieving their goal of getting asylum. On the other hand, there are people who feel that their main goal is just to get into the United States, apply for asylum, and then just kind of disappear and add to the undocumented population. And that's kind of the the kind of crux of the issue here is, are these people who are true asylum seekers, do they have a strong case, or they're people who just using our immigration system and our humanitarian laws to find a way to get into the country and stay illegally?
Did they weigh in at all on kind of the politics of all of this and how they are being portrayed by President Trump and his supporters?
Not really. I mean, most of the people who were traveling, they tended to be, you know, poor people, desperate people, and really what they were focused on was how they were going to survive even to the next day. They were aware, though, very much aware of what was happening in the United States, the response from the Trump administration. And as a result, there were a lot of people who originally started out with the goal of getting to the United States who decided they'd be better off remaining in Mexico and applying for some kind of humanitarian visa and stay there and seeing if they could make a go of making a new life in Mexico rather than the United States.
And a second caravan could be coming our way.
You know, the big question is, considering the immense backlash that this group received in the United States, the National Guard being deployed, this new zero tolerance policy of prosecuting every single person who crosses the border illegally, an actual policy of separating children from their parents to deter more people from coming, there was a question of whether they would organize another kind of caravan next year, and they said that yes, they are going to do it, and they feel like this is something that needs to be done as long as the situation remains in Central America. And despite this backlash, they felt overall that they accomplished more than they lost.
Really good reporting. We'll be following your stories. Jessica, you lifted the veil at the city of Phoenix. You had a couple of stories out about allegations of fraud involving marijuana dispensaries and potentially fake signatures. What is going on in Phoenix?
Yeah, so there have been a series of appeals of medical marijuana facilities that have some very interesting similarities to them. So usually if somebody wants to appeal a medical marijuana case, they appeal it to the Board of Adjustment, which is a volunteer board, and typically those folks are, you know, people who live in the neighborhood around it, maybe work nearby, but it's been unclear who the people that are appealing some of these facilities recently actually are. And as you mentioned, there have been some pretty serious allegations of fraud, of forgery, and some big questions as to why the same group of people is involved in multiple cases that are really not near to one another. So it's definitely struck a chord in the city after some of those allegations were brought to light.
And an investigation is underway, it sounds like.
Yes, as far as we know, the details are limited, but in court last week, attorneys for the city of Phoenix noted that there was an investigation ongoing at the city level.
We'll be following your reporting. Ron, do you have any tea that you'd like to spill?
Sure. So picking up on the Facebook ads, it sounds like there is some litigation possibly brewing up. There's a search for plaintiffs possibly to bring a case against Facebook nationally, and that might include Arizona. We'll see.
All right. That's good tea. Daniel.
The immigration facility in Eloy, it has a capacity of 1,500 beds. I heard from a very good source that for the last 3 weeks it has exceeded that capacity. That's something I'm going to be looking into. If it is exceeding capacity, that's a sign, a further sign of the Trump administration's robust immigration enforcement taking place in the United States.
All right, Jessica.
So Phoenix Mayor Greg Stanton has to resign by the end of the month if he's going to continue his run for Congress, which we believe he is. That means that his last formal city council meeting after all these years is this Wednesday. So if you want to say a tearful goodbye or say good riddance, you have one more chance, and it is this Wednesday at the formal meeting.
Now is your shot. Little tea of my own. I understand that Representative Maria Sims, a Republican from Legislative District 28, that's a swing district, her husband might be jumping into the race as an independent. That will roil that race, and it will make for kind of some epic Game of Thrones-ish politics in the 2018 cycle. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week.